The Financial Times reported on July 13th that U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Elbridge Colby has been asking U.S. allies Japan and Australia over the past few months how they would act in any war over Taiwan. The FT reported that the two allies were, quote, frustrated since the U.S. itself has a policy of ambiguity on whether it would come to Taiwan's defense. Colby didn't deny the report and wrote this on X. Trump's agenda of restoring deterrence and achieving peace through strength is, quote, by urging allies to step up their defense spending and other efforts related to our collective defense. Tony, let me come to you first. So in your view, what do you make of this? Was it a reasonable request by Elbridge Colby, given the backdrop of all of these military drills? Presumably they're training for war against China.
The request in and by itself is reasonable. However, this type of national security discussion usually are handled in a classified environment. And in those type of environment, behind closed door.
But how do we know it wasn't in a closed door, secure environment?
Most likely it was.
Yeah, it was a leak.
I'm almost certain it was. Yeah, it was a leak. It's very unfortunate. So in a public environment, our allies, Japan, Australia, have no choice but to remain non-committal. Because that's the public, the policy that's in the public.
Was it interesting to you that these were, this request was a new commitment that was being asked? Do you think, if previously this was never asked in private?
I have no doubt, because we want to make sure there are certain things that can be counted on. For example, I think what we should look at is action speaks louder than words. Okay, you look at the type of trainings and exercise Japan and United States have done together in Australia. Okay, I would guess that we should fully expect Australia and Japan are written into our joint war plan for the defense of this region. You can see from activities, look at the magnitude and the frequency of exercises and trainings together. So these exercise and training are based on what? Are based on certain joint war fighting capabilities. But
also on the expectation that they would be part of it, because what is all this planning for if it is not to engage those parts?
Certainly.
Okay, and Alex, before we get to the next section, so should we read anything into Colby's request? You know, some reports say that this means that, you know, that he's injected, or the US has injected clarity into something that was always ambiguous.
Yeah, traditional view will say that the United States itself is holding a ambiguous, you know, fashion of commitment, but forcing the allies to make it very clear. But I look at it from another angle. I think probably Japan and Australia saw this leakage or this piece in public domain. It's a good thing because they want to show their own domestic audience that they are under pressure, so they can do what, you know, probably at budget and legitimize, you know, their actions that following, you know, this statement.
Okay, we'll come to that in a little moment. Let's take a look now at how Australia's Defence Ministry Industry Minister Pat Conroy responded when asked about the issue on Australian Broadcasting Corporation's Insiders program. Watch this.
Are we giving a clear answer behind closed doors to these repeated questions?
Well, first, I don't disclose confidential discussions, but I make a couple of broad points. One, we don't engage in hypotheticals. We don't discuss hypotheticals. But secondly, the decision to commit Australian troops to a conflict will be made by the government of the day.
So, Alex, we talked about, obviously, it was a leak to the FT, but should close allies be able to share this kind of sensitive information confidentially? So, for example, is it reasonable for Colby to be asking if this was to happen this year, or if this was to happen next year, what would your response be?
I agree with Tony's assessment. I think, you know, asking these kind of questions is legit, okay, from the standpoint of the United States. So when I look at the reporter who contributed to this piece, Dimitri is a renowned, you know, correspondent. He has his reputation. So I do not believe it's a fake or make-up story. There are must carry some truth in it. It just, I think the leakage itself is also an art. You know, it's operational art, that how you chart your course to get to your goal.
Tony, Japan, as well as Australia, as we heard there, called the Taiwan crisis as a hypothetical. But is this helpful, or is this somewhat shifting, given Xi Jinping and the CCP's insistence, increasing insistence that their intention is to take Taiwan by force, and also, as you have talked to us about, alongside a Chinese nuclear buildup, alongside the amphibious lift capacity being boosted significantly, upgraded, two factors before always seen as prohibitive to an invasion.
Under the current political environment, they can't say anything different. They have to say, hey, I won't comment, it's hypothetical. But once again, as I said earlier, look at their actions. I think right now, Japan has pretty much understood its own national security is tied with Taiwan's security, and in fact, the entire First Island chain. Sort
of honing in on Australia, Colby is also reviewing the AUKUS program. This is for the US to sell nuclear submarines to Australia. And Colby is basically saying that the US needs these more than Australia in a Taiwan crisis. So how do you view Australia's willingness or unwillingness behind closed doors to communicate what it would do?
Well, I think I would assume that in closed door conversation, people are trying to be very frank and candid on this issue. But in my own private conversation with Australian, interlocutors, they assure me that the program will continue and with full support of the United States and UK.
Do you believe that Colby is testing the Australians on this issue?
Yeah. I mean, we both know Bridge Colby personally, and I talk to him all the time. So I think he is a very skillful person, and he may, that's his style. He will, test and see how the counterpart will react to his proposal.
Is there a form of pressure there? If we're going to be selling you these arms, then we do want you to stand with us. I mean, this is actually, Tony, the agreement, isn't it? In a sense, when allies buy these weapon systems, very expensive, very advanced systems from the US.
Absolutely. I think the original concept of AUKUS submarine is that we want to provide Australia a nuclear power submarine capability because the current submarine, the Collins class, does not have the endurance to support in the Taiwan or South China Sea scenario. So that was the objective, to provide that nuclear power submarine, and also to provide Australia 3 Virginia class, and the remaining is AUKUS submarine that Australia and United Kingdom working together. So United States saw that as part of the overall strategy for the entire Pacific. And so
if those systems were not going to be used in essentially the greatest threat.
It is a problem because just a few months ago, the Chinese fleet circumnavigated Australia and even conducted live fire exercise right next to Australia. So these are the type of capability Australia needs to have as part of the coalition that we expect them to help us with. So I suspect right now it is, I think Undersecretary Colby is trying to pressure Australia a little bit more on their contribution to the overall defense capability in the Asia-Pacific region.
Which is aimed at China?
Which is aimed at China. There's only one adversary at this point, which is China.
So it's aimed at China and a Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
Right. And also Chinese expansion of their influence into South Pacific.
As well. Okay. Just briefly, Alex, on Japan. So recently in their Defense White Paper 2025, again, they have warned that China is Japan's greatest strategic challenge. But recently it's complained twice to China about Chinese planes buzzing very close, 30 meters, 40 meters between the Chinese and Japanese aircraft over the East China Sea. There was also an incident last month. So in your assessment, just how dangerous is that situation?
Close encounter is dangerous.
Yeah, I should say that they stayed for 10 minutes and 15 minutes in the most recent instance.
Right. And all the operators, I mean, warfighters or pilots, they understand the risk. But however, the Japanese side, they have their responsibility to conduct reconnaissance flight. And the carrier-based, fighter jets needs to maintain a certain range of, defense for their capital ship. So the action for military experts, I think the actions are reasonable, have been doing before, but very closing contact has been very dangerous.
And what do you make of the timing of doing this right now when all these military exercises in Japan is obviously taking part? What's the message from China?
I think if we are not talking about the two carrier groups, last month or a few weeks back, but talking about recent, exercises, it fits in, Tony's narrative about deeds rather than words. We can look at the newspaper reports, but if we look at the magnitude of these exercises involving the Philippines, involving the Japanese and the Australians, then you put it together at the same time frame with Taiwan's Hanguang exercise, then you will get a different kind of picture.